Imagine being called the weakest loser in the hero's party, only to reveal you've been hiding a cheat skill that lets you tame the ultimate species, command the gods, and maybe even wipe out the whole world. The story began with our boy Rain, stuck in the hero's party, treated more like a servant than a teammate. Every day was miserable, and after years of putting up with it, the arrogant hero Arios Orlando finally kicked him out. Arios told him straight to his face that he was useless, and only slowed everyone down because they always had to save him from monsters. Rain didn't argue, and he just took off his hero's cloak, left it behind, and walked away. Later, he sat alone on a bench in the town square, thinking about every hurtful thing they'd said. Things he had once ignored now cut deep. He had no idea how he was going to make a living. Then some kids ran up to him, asking to see his trick again. Rain stood, cast a spell on a bird, and formed a temporary contract. The bird landed in front of them and gave a little bow, making the kids cheer. When he released it, they started saying they wanted to be beast tamers like him. Rain asked why they didn't want to be heroes. They said heroes were just snobs who looked down on people. Adventurers, on the other hand, could make money, travel, and have fun. That gave Rain an idea. Later that day, he went to the Adventurers Guild. The receptionist told him he had to pass a trial first. Kill 10 goblins and collect 20 medicinal herbs. With help from his squirrel partner, Rain easily found a group of goblins and took them down. They were only F rank, so they weren't much trouble. While counting the runestones they dropped, he heard a scream in the forest. He ran toward it and saw a beautiful cat girl about to be killed by a D-rank tiger. Rain tried to stab the tiger in the neck, but his sword snapped in half. The beast knocked him into a tree, leaving him in pain and barely able to move. He shouted for the girl to run and braced himself to die. But she didn't run. She jumped high into the air and kicked the tiger so hard it went down in one hit. Her strength reminded Rain of a legend about the 4 ultimate species, and one of them, the cat spirit, was said to be so rare that people thought it was just a myth. She told him she was a cat spirit, then collapsed. Rain caught her in his arms, and her first words were that she wanted to eat his meat. A moment later, she proved she meant his rations, devouring them and saying she hadn't eaten in days. She introduced herself as Kanade, one of the last cat spirits alive. After Rain told her his name, she teased him by saying she was glad an ugly guy like him had saved her. She asked about his life, so he told her his whole story as they walked back to the guild. She was the first person who had ever really listened to him. When he finished, she felt bad for how he'd been treated, but Rain patted her head and said he was fine. She told him he wasn't weak at all. Even if he thought he was just a useless beast tamer, she believed he was strong enough to tame her. She explained that when he saved her, she realized he might be the only human who could tame a cat spirit. She offered herself to be his partner, and Rain thought that with an ultimate species by his side, maybe he could finally save people from suffering the way he had. Rain realized that it didn't matter whether Kanade was an ultimate species or not. What mattered was that he wanted to know her better. So, he removed his glove, bit his finger, and let a drop of blood fall into his palm. Holding it out, he began chanting the taming spell. Magical seals appeared, circling Kanade until a glowing sigil formed on her arm, marking their contract. When the ritual ended, Kanade saw the symbol and smiled, while Rain still couldn't believe this wasn't a dream. She reached out, took his hand, and they both ran off together. At the Adventurers Guild, Ruby congratulated Rain on completing his first quest and becoming an official F-rank adventurer. She also questioned how a scruffy loser like him had managed to get a girl to even talk to him. Rain received his payment, 50 copper coins, but quickly realized it wasn't enough to rent a room. Ruby reminded him that no girl would want to share a room with someone smelling like an anime convention anyway. That's when trouble walked up. A sleazy adventurer approached, saying he'd never seen a real cat spirit before and telling Kanade to ditch the ugly human she was with. Kanade's ears twitched in anger. She yelled that Rain was her hot master, but the man just laughed, doubting that someone so weak could tame the rarest ultimate species. Kanade shot back that Rain was far stronger than him, which made the man challenge Rain to an arm wrestling match with Kanade as the prize. Rain knew that refusing might let this creep harass Kanade again, so he accepted. They clasped hands and the match began. A moment later, Rain slammed the man's hand into the table so hard it was over instantly. Kanade declared Rain the winner, while the man whimpered on the ground, realizing his days of sleazy games were over. After dragging the loser away, Rain wondered when he'd become this strong. Kanade explained it was a side effect of taming an ultimate species. Part of her power had transferred to him, giving him the physical strength of a cat spirit. She teased him, saying he looked like the perfect protector daddy, and insisted they head out for another adventure right away. While collecting herbs, they heard screams in the distance. They ran toward the sound and found a group of Shadow Clan bandits robbing an old man. Kinnaid told Rain to retreat and get help, but he said there was no time. His plan was simple. He would distract the bandits while she rescued the man. Rain moved first, darting through them and knocking several down while Kinnaid pulled the old man to safety. 3 bandits tried to finish Rain off, but he held his ground. Kinnaid realized again that Rain truly was the only human who could have tamed her, and she had no regrets about becoming his partner. Still, she feared that her power might one day harm him, so she wanted to fight on the front lines herself. But as she watched him dodge an axe and take down the remaining attackers, she couldn't look away. Her heart pounded, and her face grew warm, though she quickly claimed it was just fear when Rain asked why she was blushing. With the fight over, the old man thanked them for saving his life, though Rain muttered that someone that ugly should have been in a grave already. Thinking about the attack, Rain guessed that the Shadow Clan would be targeting them again soon. Instead of running, he decided they should head straight into enemy territory before the enemy came to them. Kinnaid thought charging into a hideout filled with hundreds of bandits was asking for a quick and painful death. Rain, however, said he had an ace up his sleeve. After a long walk, they reached the Shadow Clan's base, and Kinnaid's eyes started tearing up. She muttered about dying before her character even had time to develop, then awkwardly hinted that it wasn't too late for them to, well, create some plot together. Rain ignored the hint and revealed his trump card, bees. Not just 1 or 2, but an entire swarm he had tamed. That's when Kinnaid learned he wasn't just a beast tamer, but also an insect tamer. She'd never even heard of someone mastering 2 classes at once. Rain told her to go to the capital and bring reinforcements while he handled the bandits. Kinnaid ran off, wondering if she was really helping as his familiar, though part of her admitted she just wanted an excuse to be on her knees for him. Once she was gone, Rain amplified the bees' poison with his magic before sending them into the hideout. At the same time, the hero's party was barely escaping with their lives. Arios immediately blamed everything on their new beast tamer, yelling that he should have scouted better. Mina sarcastically asked if he seriously thought 1 squirrel was enough to cover the area, and another teammate said he should have tamed at least 20 squirrels to avoid an ambush. The replacement beast tamer stared at them like they were insane. Taming just 2 animals at once was already enough to fry a human brain. Leon then wondered if Rain might have been stronger than they all believed, but quickly covered it up by calling the new tamer useless and threatening to burn him alive if he didn't take the blame for abandoning the old man. The poor guy ran for his life. Back at the hideout, Rain's poisoned bees took down the entire Shadow Clan. Soon after, Kinnaid returned with adventurers, and together they restrained the surviving bandits. Their leader was shocked that Rain had managed to wipe out the whole clan on his own. Rain petted Kinnaid, earning a happy reaction from her, but suddenly the ground started shaking. From a prison chamber inside the cave, 3 massive king lizards broke free. The remaining bandits had been waiting for this chance, but their plan backfired when the lizards turned on them, killing them instantly before rampaging toward the adventurers. Rain shielded Kinnaid from an incoming strike and punched one of the monsters. Kinnaid leapt over him and kicked it back. Rain ordered the adventurers to evacuate the bandits, saying he and Kinnaid would handle the beasts. He thought about how useless he once was, but things had changed. He now had someone fighting beside him. With Kinnaid at his side, they took down the king lizards together. When they finally emerged from the cave, everyone congratulated him. Rain realized it didn't matter if Kinnaid was an ultimate species or not. Being with her made him feel like he could do anything. Kinnaid felt the same way. That night, Kinnaid was excited about finally sleeping in a proper bed, but Rain was confused when he realized they were sharing a room. The innkeeper wished the ugly virgin luck lasting more than a minute. With his new promotion to E rank and extra pay from defeating the bandits, Rain had rented the place without realizing there was only 1 room left and 1 bed. Kinnaid tried dragging him toward it, but Rain refused, saying he couldn't sleep in the same room as a girl. Kinnaid admitted she was embarrassed, but said she was sure he was just a harmless simp who wouldn't dare make a move. Rain told her not to trust people so easily, but she replied that she only trusted him. After all, he had risked his life countless times to save others. She couldn't let her master sleep outside. Rain finally agreed to stay in the room, but when she suggested they share the same bed, he shouted that it was never going to happen. That night, while Rain slept, Kinnaid kept her eyes on him. She found herself thinking how remarkable he truly was, and how, after all the pain and struggle he'd endured, she wanted to be the one to heal his wounds. In her mind, she silently promised that she would stay by his side forever. A week later, Ruby approached them with troubling news. A colossal beast had taken control of Stride Bridge, cutting off all trade. She explained that the city was offering 5 gold pieces to anyone who could defeat it. Rain, lured by the reward, accepted without hesitation. When they arrived, Kinnaid took one look at the massive structure and and muttered internally that the bridge was definitely bigger than Rain's. Well, certain assets. She barely had time to finish the thought before the sky darkened. A massive shadow descended a dragon. The dust parted, revealing not just a dragon, but a red-haired beauty stepping forward. She introduced herself as Tanya, a dragonoid, the second most powerful of the ultimate species, and declared that she'd been searching for a worthy opponent. She invited Rain and Tamed to face her together. Tamed scoffed, reminding Rain that she herself was also an ultimate species. The fight began instantly. Tanya blurred forward, her strike narrowly blocked by Rain, though her raw power stunned him a single blow that had already wiped out countless adventurers. Without missing a beat, she unleashed her second attack, a wave of blazing fire. Rain and Tamed barely escaped, but Tanade's tail caught the flames. Enraged, she charged Tanya, aiming a low kick, but Tanya sidestepped and countered with a flurry of blows. Rain hung back, thinking it felt almost unfair to interrupt, but when Tanya focused entirely on Tamed, he lunged, only to be caught along with Tamed. Tanya spun them in a whirlwind and launched them high into the air. Trapped mid-flight, they saw her prepare a finishing blast of fire. Yet, when the smoke cleared, both were still standing. At the last moment, they had used each other's feet as a springboard to vault away from the flames. Tanya, impressed, praised them for lasting so long, a rare feat for adventurers. Rain, recognizing the overwhelming might of a dragon, told Tamed to buy him 3 minutes. Confident but suspicious of his so-called plan, she dove back into the fight. Tanya evaded most of her strikes, noting she'd burn through stamina soon. But Tamed boasted that Rain's plan would turn the tide. Rain froze for a moment, realizing she was about to spill everything, but forced himself to focus. During their clash, he had sensed something else, a faint presence overhead. Spotting a lone bird circling the fight, he tamed it and sent it off to bring reinforcements. Minutes later, as Tamed kept Tanya busy, Rain called her back and unveiled his move. A massive swarm of birds diving at Tanya, pecking and clawing. The dragonoid brushed them aside effortlessly, mocking the feeble attack, but her smirk faltered, her vision blurred. She realized too late that the birds were carriers of a rare venom strong enough to paralyze even dragons. Kanad rushed to embrace Rain in victory. Rain then surprised Tanya by asking her to come with them. She bristled, thinking he meant to sell her off, but he clarified that he simply wanted to talk. Tanya was still puzzled why Rain only wanted to talk, especially since he could have done anything to her in that moment. She decided he was the strangest man she had ever met. Kanad, however, wasn't in the mood for patience. She began tickling Tanya until the proud dragon agreed to tag along. When they returned to the Adventurers Guild, Ruby could barely process the sight. The so-called useless adventurer had somehow taken down the bridge's terrifying guardian. Curious, she asked if the new girl was a dragon, but Rain casually claimed she was just some oddball in cosplay. Tanya wasn't having it. She shoved him aside, proudly declaring herself the queen of the skies. Before she could finish her speech, Rain stuffed something into her mouth and dragged her out of the guild. On the road, Rain warned her that revealing her true identity would throw the town into chaos. Tanya immediately ignored him, wandering around flexing her strength and telling children she was a real dragon. Outside the town gates, she offered a clumsy apology for exposing herself, but Rain sighed and advised her to leave for her own safety. Tanya, however, had other plans. She declared she would stick with them for training and clung to Rain, saying she liked the way he protected her earlier. Tamed erupted in outrage, demanding Tanya get her hands off her master. Tanya smirked and teased that no one liked a girl who couldn't share. Rain wondered aloud if Tamed would be fine with Tanya joining their party. After some grumbling, Tamed reluctantly agreed, but insisted Rain form a contract with Tanya as well. Rain doubted taming 2 ultimate species was even possible, yet he bit his finger, summoned the magic circle, and began the bond ritual. Sealing ribbons wrapped around Tanya as she accepted his offers, and the taming sigil marked her hand. Tamed told her to take a look. Tanya said the warmth of the mark made her feel happy to always be connected to Rain. Rain, however, silently thanked his own hand, believing all those lonely nights of training were finally paying off. Tanya noticed his serious face and asked why he seemed unhappy, assuring him she looked forward to serving him. That same night, far away, the heroes' party was struggling. They had wasted a week in the woods and realized life without Rain doing all the hard work was pure misery. Arios decided they should bring him back, not out of kindness, but because the gullible fool could be used to clear the lost woods before being abandoned again. Meanwhile, back at Rain's camp, Tanya and Tamed were bickering over who got to eat Rain's meat while he slept. The insults flew. Tanya called Tamed a flat plank, while Tamed retaliated by calling her a bloated, overgrown mess. By morning, the group received their first official job together, clearing the forest of slimes. Though they were only F-rank monsters, they could multiply quickly and destroy farmland. Tamed despised them for always making her wet, but Tanya promised to handle the pests herself. Rain was pleased to see them getting along already. Hours passed without a single slime sighting, so Rain decided to scout from the sky. He found a bird and used his magic to assimilate into it. His body went limp on the ground and conveniently landed on Tanya's massive chest, while his consciousness moved into the bird. From above, Rain waved at them through the bird's body. Tamed complained that he was far too overpowered, while Tanya noticed the opportunity to enjoy his unconscious form. When Rain suspiciously asked what they were planning to do to him, the two women shouted for him to just leave already. After a few minutes of searching, Rain finally led the group straight to the slime's hideout. Tamed was ready to smash them into jelly, but Tanya stopped her and turned to Rain, asking if he could even use magic. Rain admitted that the most he had ever done was light a candle, which didn't exactly scream battle mage. Tanya wasn't impressed. She pushed him forward and told casting a fireball at the slimes anyway. Rain stared into his palm, trying to recall the structure of magical circles. He focused, poured all his energy into it, and suddenly launched a massive fireball, vaporizing the entire slime group in one fiery explosion. Tanya smirked like she had expected this all along. Her theory was simple. When Rain tamed Tamed, he gained the physical abilities of a cat spirit. Now that he had tamed Tanya, he had inherited the magical powers of a dragon, giving him the second highest magic power in the world. Of course, before he could feel too proud, hundreds more slimes started popping out of nowhere. Tanya told him these were perfect for his training, reminding him that as their master, he couldn't afford to look weak. Determined not to be seen as a beta in front of the girls, Rain asked Tanya to teach him her magic. Unfortunately, she turned out to be a terrible teacher, more focused on flair than instruction. Still, Rain managed to get stronger while blasting slimes and finishing the quest. When they returned to the guild, their reward for the slime extermination was huge. Naturally, they spent it going around town and eating the best food. Rain was just relieved Tanya hadn't blurted out his secrets. At one restaurant, however, both girls began competing to devour his meat. Tanya even grabbed his giant sausage and swallowed it whole before he could get a single bite, leaving him wondering how he always ended up in these situations. Between mouthfuls, the girls asked how he became such a great beast tamer. They wanted the full story. Rain hesitated but eventually began his tale. 10 years ago, he had grown up in a small village of beast tamers where his parents taught him to bond with animals. But those happy days didn't last. When he was 12, his parents sent him out alone to practice taming beasts. That night, he saw a plume of fire in the distance. He ran back to his village only to find it burned to the ground. Everyone, including his family, had been killed. He was the sole survivor. Adventurers took him in, but only to use him as cheap labor in exchange for scraps of food. Years later, the hero Arios invited him to join their party, and Rain foolishly thought his life would improve. Instead, he became nothing more than a pack mule, working without rest while they reaped the glory. Finishing his story, Rain apologized for being depressing, but Tamed held his hands and told him she finally understood why he risked his life for others. It wasn't out of obligation, but because he genuinely wanted to spare people from the sadness he had endured. She said he wasn't pathetic at all. Tanya agreed, calling him too kind for his own good, but admitted that was one of the things she liked about him, and she was glad he was her master. Those words made Rain realize all his suffering hadn't been meaningless. Tanya swore she would burn every single one of Rain's abusers to ash, while Tamed chimed in that the hero's party was useless anyway, and even called Tanya nicer than expected for a fatso with massive cannons. They all burst into laughter, and Rain silently wished that the three of them could stay together forever. The next morning, the group marched toward the mountains to deal with a nest of orcs. Tanya made quick work of the first wave, unleashing a single fiery breath that roasted them all to perfection. But Rain reminded everyone not to drop their guard just yet. Tanya, however, seemed convinced there was nothing to worry about. Tamed crushed another orc under a massive rock, and when one tried to dash at Tanya, she flicked her tail and sent him straight into oblivion. But her overconfidence caught up to her. She'd forgotten one straggler, and before she could breathe fire, the orc grabbed her leg and slammed her to the ground. Furious, she blasted his face clean off. Just as she caught her breath, another came from behind. This time, Rain stepped in, taking a knife to his arm before Taned's kick erased the attacker from existence. Tanya noticed Rain bleeding and panicked, but he calmly reminded her that his healing magic still worked. She watched as the wound sealed up before her eyes. Still, guilt ate at her, and on the way back to the guild, she kept glancing at him, troubled. After Rain collected his reward, Tamed mentioned that Tanya had slipped away, looking downcast. Out on a bridge alone, Tanya admitted to herself that Rain had been more worried about her than himself. Her arrogance and power had blinded her, and it nearly cost him his life. She didn't know how to face him. That's when Rain appeared, asking why she looked so gloomy. She apologized for ignoring his warning. This time, it had only been a small wound, but she feared one day it could be worse. Rain simply patted her head and told her he was just happy she was safe, though she should be more careful. Tamed soon wrapped her arms around Tanya, relieved she was fine. Later at the inn, Rain begged the receptionist for another room, claiming his body couldn't survive another night of torture. That night, while Rain lay on the hard floor, Tanya realized he'd given them the bed, even though he was the one paying. She couldn't stop thinking about him, feeling a strange warmth in her chest. She told herself she wasn't falling for him. After all, she wasn't some easy conquest, but deep down she knew her heart was lying. Before sleeping, she gently covered him with a blanket and wished him pleasant dreams. The next day in the forest, Tanya suggested Rain should buy a weapon, and Tamed got excited at the idea of her master growing even stronger. But Rain suddenly froze. The hero's party stood before them. Arios greeted him with mock warmth, saying it had been a long time, but Rain turned away without a word. Tanya asked if they really were the hero's party, which seemed to surprise Arios. He couldn't believe a useless man like Rain had tamed a cat spirit and a dragonoid, so he assumed Rain must be their servant. Tamed immediately shouted that Rain was her master, and Rain demanded to know what they wanted. Arios explained that the Lost Woods were trickier than expected. The longer someone searched for the destination, the farther away it seemed. He wanted Rain to help explore it and be their luggage carrier again. His companions added that Rain should be grateful for the opportunity. Rain told them flatly to find someone else. Before Rain could leave, Mina dropped some heavy news. They were on the hunt for a noble relic. Without it, the Demon King's forces would soon crush every city. Realizing history might repeat itself, Rain reluctantly agreed to join them. Arios mocked him, saying a loser like Rain should have said yes from the start, and the whole group joined in the ridicule. But Tanya and Tamed weren't having it. They stopped everyone, insisting the heroes owed Rain an apology first. Firing a man and then asking for a favor deserved more than just a weak YouTuber apology. She demanded the heroes grovel on their knees, warning that if they didn't obey, she'd burn them all, though she promised to spare them for her master's sake. The idea of groveling had the heroes screaming in protest. None would admit to ever doing Rain wrong. When Arios tried grabbing Rain, he insulted Tanya and Tamed, calling them filthy animals no matter how good-looking they were. That disrespect was the last straw. Rain warned Arios he'd smack him even harder if he ever disrespected his comrades again. Not one to back down, Arios challenged Rain to a duel. When Rain accepted, the face-off began. Tamed was paired against Agath, promising to knock him to his knees and force an apology. Agath refused to apologize to someone he called useless. Tamed sprinted at him, almost snapping his sword with a kick before unleashing a relentless hammer-like barrage. Agath tried slashing her, then used a secret hellfire technique. Tamed casually kicked the attack away like it was nothing, and joked that men wielding huge swords to look like Johnny Sins were just compensating for something. That hit a nerve, and Agath swore to use all his power. Tamed said she'd been holding back, and it wasn't personal if he got hurt. The scared man trembled, wondering why someone so strong would follow Rain. In a blink, Tamed disappeared and kicked him square in the face, knocking him out cold and shattering a tree behind him. She wondered if she went too far, but figured a man like him deserved to have his soul sucked out. Meanwhile, Tanya faced off against Lian and Mina. They launched magical blasts at her, but with a snap of her fingers, Tanya nullified their attacks, mocking their power as small as their chests. Realizing they were getting clapped, the two tried to unleash their ultimate spells, but Tanya snapped again, canceling their moves. She revealed this hidden skill, Material Canceller, could destroy the core of any magic attack and wipe it out completely, meaning they had zero chance of winning. Lian and Mina exhausted themselves with all their attacks, while Tanya kept snapping her fingers, draining their stamina. When Mina suggested Tanya should bow to the gods, Tanya fired back that Rain was her master, capable of taming thousands of beasts, and maybe even gods one day. Lian and Mina decided to put everything into one final desperate attack, but Tanya wasn't having any of it. She snapped her fingers right in their faces again, warning them that mocking her master would have serious consequences. Suddenly, from beneath her feet, she began casting a legendary level spell, declaring she would make the heavens crush their souls. The sky turned an eerie red, and hundreds of magical sigils appeared above them. Tanya chanted her ultimate end spell, telling them to accept their fate. Terrified, Lian and Mina started begging for forgiveness, apologizing desperately. Although Tanya really wanted to burn them alive, she wouldn't risk upsetting her master. Meanwhile, Arios called it foolish for someone to hit a hero, but before he could finish, Rain rushed in and slapped him across the mouth, making it clear he wasn't interested in hearing any nonsense. Arios retaliated by swinging his sword wildly, launching a barrage of attacks that Rain barely dodged. Even though Arios was a hero, Rain noticed his power was nowhere near the strength Tanya had shown earlier. Arios grabbed his own arm, frustrated, and punched Rain in the stomach, knocking him down. Rain barely had time to wonder why he was so strong before Arios smashed a rock with one strike and kept attacking. Rain then revealed the secret behind his power. Years of studying how beasts moved helped him predict and counter any attack. Coupled with the strength he gained from taming the cat spirit, there was never any chance Arios could win. Not to be outdone, Arios cast a lightning blast, boasting about his hero's unique magic. But when he launched his Gigavolt attack, Rain's fireball, powered by Tanya's strength, cancelled it out perfectly. Knowing that was Rain's only spell, Arios began casting all his other magic attacks, but Rain dodged them all smoothly. The twist? Rain hadn't even used his own powers yet. When Arios charged, he suddenly found himself frozen in place, paralyzed and falling to the ground. Rain explained he had tamed insects during their fight, using telekinesis to control one, and that meant Arios was already defeated. But what came next was even worse for Arios. Remembering how the hero's party had abused him, Rain readied his fist and launched a powerful strike. When the dust settled, Rain revealed he'd missed on purpose, because a direct hit would have ended Arios' life right then and there. Just then, Tanya and Kanade ran back, hugging Rain tightly as the battle ended in their favor. A few hours later, they began exploring the Lost Woods. Tanya asked if she could just burn the whole forest down, but Rain told her to hold off. He gently rubbed their heads, happy they had protected him so well. Still, he was determined to help Arios get the Holy Shield to save the world. Using a bird he tamed, Rain flew above the forest to find its center. Although the path was hidden, he spotted the directions they needed. For hours they walked, only to realize they had been going in circles. Rain couldn't believe it since they had been walking straight the whole time. Tanya sensed something was wrong and activated her material search. Magical energy orbs led them to a special tree, emitting illusion magic to confuse and mislead travelers. The forest kept shifting to block their path. Kanade tried punching the tree, furious at being tricked. Suddenly a voice spoke from the tree, warning them to leave. From inside appeared a fairy, an ultimate species unseen for over 200 years, with magic stronger than even dragons. When Rain tried to introduce himself, the fairy told him to get his ugly face away. She kept calling him disgusting and promised to kill them if they didn't leave immediately. After running for a while, Tanya started wondering why she had been so hostile toward them. Rain thought there must be a reason she was protecting the hidden shield of truth, so he decided to try talking to her again. When they caught up, he told her he only wanted the shield to protect everyone from the demons. The fairy warned him she would attack if he came closer. Rain said he would gladly take her attack if it meant earning her trust. As she summoned magical arrows, Rain held off the girls, knowing risking his life was the best way to gain trust. The fairy fired illusionary arrows at him but was shocked he didn't run away. She couldn't understand why a human would act that way, especially since humans had burned her village and killed her people before. Rain swore he wasn't like those humans and hoped she could trust him. She accused him of trying to deceive her and shot again, but Tanya and Kanade jumped in, blocking the attack to protect their master. They told the fairy how Rain had saved them when everyone else wanted to use them. The fairy found it strange that two ultimate species cared so much for a human. Extending her arms, she asked Rain's name and introduced herself as Sora, saying she was willing to listen. After he explained everything, Sora said she couldn't give them the shield because it was the only thing keeping her kind invisible to humans. But then, she decided to bring it out anyway, saying she didn't want humans to be destroyed by the Demon King. She added that the fairies had promised the previous hero they would guard the shield until the Demon King returned. As they walked away, Rain noticed Sora looked upset. He asked if something was bothering her and if he could help. She hesitated, worried she might put them in danger, but Rain insisted he still wanted to help, no matter the risk. Tanya said that was just the kind of man Rain was, and Kanade added that they were stronger than they looked, and all of them wanted to help. Because of those words, Sora revealed she had a younger twin sister named Runa, who always helped protect their village. But one day, when they left the safety of their barrier, a giant monster appeared. Their attacks were too weak to stop the demon, and it captured Runa. When Sora ran to ask for help, the fairy leader blamed her for the capture and said no one would risk their life for a useless sister. Those harsh words crushed Sora's spirit. She never wanted to lose her sister. Rain wiped away her tears, telling her she didn't have to endure the pain alone and promising to save Runa. Sora hugged him tightly, finally letting out the tears she'd been holding back. Later, Rain found the Shadow Knight holding Runa captive. He counted down and launched a fireball as they charged in. The attack didn't work well, but Kanade jumped from above and kicked the knight while he was distracted. Rain followed up with a punch to the stomach. The knight wondered if Rain was really the hero, but Rain told him calling him that was a disgusting insult. He was here to save the fairy, not play hero. Realizing he was outmatched, the knight swung his sword at Runa, but Tanya blocked the attack and freed her from the shackles. After flying away, Kanade and Rain teamed up to attack the knight, but they were surprised to see him still standing strong. Suddenly, the knight spun around and created a tornado, making things chaotic. Rain told Kanade he had an idea to finish the fight. As a magic circle appeared, he searched the forest for insects and found a nest of bees, which he quickly tamed. Even though their poison wouldn't hurt him, it would at least distract the knight. Meanwhile, Rain cast a spell to boost Kanade's physical power. With her strength enhanced, Kanade charged at the knight and punched him hard in the stomach, leaving a hole in his chest and wiping him out completely. Afterward, Kanade asked what warm energy he had poured inside her. Rain cheekily said he could pour that warm energy into her again. At night, back in the forest, the twin sisters hugged each other tightly. Runa asked Sora who this new man was, and joked she'd let him tie her up and do whatever he wanted. After a brief fight between the sisters, Sora explained that they couldn't stay in their village anymore, especially since everyone had abandoned her. She worried about demons attacking them, so Kanade asked if they wanted to join their party. Sora said Rain had already saved her sister, and Runa was excited to feel how strong his body was. She asked if they could join and begged him to form a contract with them. Tanya, surprised that no one had ever tamed fairies before, said she trusted her master wouldn't give up. Rain accepted the challenge. Standing before a big tree, Rain put on his glove and bit his finger, wondering what magic would work to tame fairies. After analyzing countless forms of magic, he raised his arm and started the taming ritual. Sealing ribbons wrapped around both sisters, and his magical energy flowed into them, completing the pact. They saw the magical patterns on his hand, but Rain's energy was almost gone. He nearly collapsed, but the girls caught him, promising to always protect their master. Back at the hero's mansion, the girls wondered why they had to hide, but Rain showed them the Shield of Truth. Arios couldn't believe Rain had found the shield in just 2 days and accused him of bringing a fake. Mina examined the shield carefully and confirmed it was real before leaving. Arios asked who the 2 girls were, but Rain said it was none of their business, hoping to keep the fact that he had tamed fairies a secret. As Rain walked away with 20 gold coins, Agath asked if he wanted to join their party again. They admitted they'd been struggling without him and promised better pay and treatment. But Rain knew they hadn't changed. Kanade told him to ignore the arrogant Agath and leave. Rain told Agath to shove his offer up his bald backside, realizing the only thing he ever wanted was people who truly cared about him, and he had already found them. The rest of the heroes' party thought Rain was a fool for refusing to rejoin, but after they left, Arios couldn't forget the humiliation Rain caused him. He vowed he would kill Rain one day. In the forest, the fairies wondered what made the hero so special. Rain explained that the gods had blessed the hero with their blood, granting him a limit break ability that lets him grow stronger without limits, enough to defeat the Demon King. The girls wondered if Rain had a similar power since he already had Kanade's physical strength, Tanya's magic, and now fairy magic too. Kanade asked if Rain would keep taming ultimate species until he was strong enough to defeat the Demon King. Rain was shocked to hear that, since he'd lived his whole life as a slave and never thought anyone would believe in him. To protect his new friends, he promised to defeat the Demon King if he could, though he admitted he wasn't strong enough yet. The girls vowed to support him when the time came, and Kanade reminded him they would always be by his side. The next morning, Rain noticed his room was getting crowded and wished the other room would open up. He blamed himself for being a spineless coward who couldn't just lay down the law when tempting opportunities presented themselves. Later that day, the hot twins clung to his arms as they headed to the blacksmith's shop. When they arrived, they were put off by the dwarf's ugly face, which seemed to intimidate them more than the weapons on display. Runa spotted a whip and let her imagination run wild, thinking about Rain dominating in more ways than just battles. But when Sora started playfully beating her up, Rain's attention shifted to a dagger he wanted to buy. Still, something felt off about the materials used in the dagger. Just then, an ugly idiot swaggered into the shop, slammed his money on the table, and demanded the best sword available. The dwarf pulled out what he called his finest sword from behind the counter, making the adventurer excited. But Rain immediately doubted that rusty piece of junk could be the best the dwarf had. All the swords in the shop looked powerful on display, but Rain quickly noticed their cores were made of weak materials. When he asked the dwarf if he was hiding something, the dwarf smiled and praised Rain for his keen eye. He admitted that most of his weapons were just random pieces he forged in his free time. But then he showed them the real swords, the ones he'd poured his soul into. The dwarf explained how nowadays, adventurers believed that buying expensive swords automatically made them powerful, so when they got bored of those swords, they just tossed them aside like garbage. To the dwarf, each sword was like a child, and he only wanted to give his true masterpieces to those who truly valued them. He believed Rain was the only man considerate enough to tell the difference, so he promised to craft a personalized weapon just for him. There was one catch though: the dwarf had no rare materials left to make the weapon, crushing Rain's hopes of getting even a small dagger like the one he admired. A few hours later, the group went to the Adventurers Guild, which was unusually packed. Kanade asked Ruby why there were so many people, and Ruby explained that the hero was recruiting new party members. Both twins noticed Rain looked a little down, but he patted them on the head, telling them he'd be fine. Ruby spotted the twins standing behind Rain and wondered if they were his friends. Runa cheekily said they even shared a room at night. Ruby couldn't wrap her head around how a disgusting loser like Rain could somehow be a great man with not just one, but 4 wives. Rain tried to hush her and told Ruby to do her job, quickly requesting approval for their quest to mine mithril. This rare ore was exactly what the dwarf needed to make the ultimate weapons. But though the dwarf had a mine full of mithril, All the ore had suddenly vanished. Rain volunteered to find the missing mithril, and Donovan the dwarf agreed, asking how much gold Rain wanted as payment. Rain surprised him by saying the only thing he desired was the weapon Donovan would craft for him. This was the first time anyone had valued Donovan's creations more than gold, and he promised to make Rain the best weapon he possibly could. A few hours later, the group set off toward the mine, but Sora and Runa quickly grew too tired to keep going. After spending their whole lives like shut-ins, never leaving their homes and just watching anime, they felt completely drained, basically like all the couch potatoes watching this video right now. Even Kanade admitted that it was a hot day, but Rain, knowing water had to be nearby, led them to a lake where the girls begged to go swimming. When he agreed, Kanade started stripping in front of him, but his spineless self quickly looked away and decided to give them some privacy. Still, Rain tamed 2 squirrels to keep an eye out and warn him if the girls got into trouble, then decided to rest himself. And yes, lake scenes usually mean plot, and more plot. Soon enough, Kanad's tail got bitten, and the squirrels stopped sending any signals. Rain dashed over only to find the girls without a shred of plot armor, screaming at him for not paying attention. He apologized profusely and promised to do anything for them, but instead of demanding more, they told him just to keep being himself. After all, he was the best leader they could ask for. Then, in true anime fashion, they dared him to strip down and join them swimming, all without plot armor. Hours later, they reached the Mithril Cave. Rain warned the girls to stay hidden after all. Such a huge stash of Mithril couldn't just vanish unless someone was stealing it. From above, he spotted an eagle acting suspiciously, alerting bandits nearby. When the thieves emerged, Rain told the girls to keep themselves safe so he could question the bandits. However, the bandits knocked them unconscious before he could get any answers. Luckily, Sora explained they could peer into the bandits' memories to uncover the truth. Kneeling, the girls activated their memory search ability. Inside the bandits' minds, they saw an entire crew stealing the ores. The girls wondered if they'd actually be useful to Rain, who said yes, and the bandits immediately begged for head pats, just like Titania and Kanade got. So Rain began patting their heads, while the girls giggled, wondering what else those hands were good for. Afterward, Rain mentioned something felt off about the birds, suspecting another beast tamer was controlling them. Inside the cave, the bandits debated what happened to their comrades. Their leader revealed they'd all been beaten badly, so they needed to hide and ambush their enemies when least expected. As Rain and the girls moved through the cave, a massive fireball suddenly appeared. The twins leapt to deflect it, while the mages tried launching another magical attack. The girls, demanding more head pats, restrained the mages and took away their magic powers. Then 2 archers tried shooting arrows at them, but Tanya burned one down, while Kanade knocked out the other, herself included. Once the bandits were tied up, Rain faced the beast tamer and told him to give up his life of crime. The bandit rushed at Rain but got deflected and knocked down by a single punch. Not willing to give up, the bandit summoned his most powerful ally. A massive behemoth appeared from the cave's depths, ready to crush Rain. Everyone realized it was a B-rank monster. Only the strongest beast tamers could control such a creature. The bandit boasted he had trained it since it was young and unleashed it on them. Rain narrowly dodged the first attack as the cave started collapsing around them. With a single look, he signaled Kanade to escort the bandits outside the cave. Once outside, Kanade wanted to go back inside, but Tanya promised to watch the others while Kanade helped Rain. Inside the cave, Rain struggled against falling debris. Just as the behemoth was about to crush him, Kanade pulled him away and promised to help. Rain told her he would distract the beast while she restrained the bandit, since the monster would obey all of the bandits' commands. As soon as they stood up, the behemoth lunged at them again, but Rain kept dodging and distracting it with quick moves. The cave was still collapsing all around, so he summoned a fireball to burn the beast. Meanwhile, Kanade managed to restrain the beast tamer, but the stubborn bandit ordered this behemoth to keep fighting even if he died. The cave trembled violently as the behemoth unleashed more attacks. Rain made a quick escape, knowing he couldn't afford to let his party down. He swore to unleash every ounce of his power and trust in his friends. Suddenly, the behemoth froze in place and its tamer lost control. The taming sigil on the bandit's arm shattered into pieces. Rain explained he had overwritten the bandit's taming sigil using his own power. Though it was supposed to be impossible to overwrite such a sigil, he believed in the strength of his friends and thought he could even break the laws of taming itself. The bandit screamed that he had raised the behemoth his whole life, but his words only confused the monster's mind. As the bandit kept yelling, the behemoth suddenly turned on him, trying to bite him down. At that moment, Rain unleashed a massive fireball using all his mana and destroyed the beast. When the dust settled, only a crystal remained, a reminder that taming monsters was risky since the sigil only suppressed the beast's hatred of humans. A few minutes later, the bandits admitted they had one thing in common. They all bought Donovan's cheap, half-baked weapons. Their plan to steal the mithril ores was revenge on the blacksmith. Donovan, realizing this was his fault, confessed that he'd been dishonest with both his weapons and customers. admitting he was a failure as a craftsman. Rain called Donovan a worthless failure too, but held his hand and encouraged him to make things right by dedicating his life to crafting only the best weapons. Those words comforted Donovan, who promised to start fresh with Rain's personal weapon. When asked what kind he wanted, Rain whispered a secret idea for a dagger with a gauntlet. Later that night, the hero was having no luck recruiting beast tamers. He insulted one man, calling him a loser who could only tame a single beast, and asked if he could tame an ultimate species. The man replied it was impossible for anyone to tame such creatures. After the man left, the hero realized all the ones he had rejected were actually the nation's strongest beast tamers, denied because they couldn't compare to Rain. Furious, the hero was starting to take out his anger on everyone and told Tanya to get some rest. Before leaving, Tanya reminded him he needed a rest too, since saving the world was no small task. But the hero knew deep down he couldn't save the world yet, not until he used the demonic ring he'd been hiding to kill Rain. The next day, Rain strolled through town with Sora and Runa, while Tanya's massive cannons rested silently. Suddenly, they caught the scent of something delicious. Curious, the twins asked if they could try it. After buying some, they devoured Rain's sausage and declared it the best meat they had ever tasted. After they finished eating, the twins asked Rain about the special powers he'd gained from taming them. Kanade had gifted him with overpowered strength, and Tanya had given him nearly endless mana. But when they asked what ability he got from them, Rain realized he hadn't gained any new skill at all. Still, he comforted them by patting their heads, saying he didn't need any special powers from them because they were his precious comrades who'd stand by his side, and that was all he ever wanted. That made the twins happy, and they eagerly wanted more of Rain's sausage. But just as they headed to the shop, a mysterious man suddenly stopped them and demanded their names. Intimidated, the twins introduced themselves, only for the man to burst out laughing and declare they would become his wives. The twins thought he was disgusting, but the man introduced himself as Edgar, son of the Horizon Lord, so they had no choice but to obey his royal orders. With a snap of his fingers, Edgar's guards surrounded Rain and ordered him to hand over the girls. Rain swore he would never give up the friends he cared about. Hearing this, Edgar told his men to attack, but all of them were knocked out by Rain's swift moves. The guards warned Edgar that Rain wasn't an ordinary man, but Rain told Edgar to give up because he'd never surrender his girls. In a desperate move, Edgar ordered his guards to threaten the nearby civilians, saying they were just tools to get what he wanted. Rain quickly assessed the situation and realized he couldn't save all the civilians without revealing the fairies' magic, which might make them outcasts. As he pondered, he realized he had gained a new ability: casting multiple spells at once. Summoning 30 magical sigils, Rain unleashed a massive fireball that burned all the soldiers. This was the special power gifted by the fairies. He told Edgar to never show his worthless face again. Before fleeing, Edgar swore he'd get his revenge. As the guards chased after Edgar, the fairies thanked Rain for saving them. Everyone else around thought Rain was way cooler than the hero. But an old nasty hag warned them to leave town now that they were safe and find somewhere far away. From a distance, the hero smiled slyly, pointing his demonic ring toward Rain. Back at the inn, Rain learned from the hag that Edgar had been kidnapping attractive girls and torturing them in his mansion. Since he was the Lord's only son, the Lord silenced any victims who defied orders, even killing them. Tanya immediately said it was time to burn Edgar's mansion to the ground, promising she wouldn't allow him to threaten Sora, Runa, or any townspeople again. Rain knew they had to be careful but wanted to save everyone. Though he felt like just a beast tamer, Kanade reminded him he couldn't abandon the city. Tanya said they all knew how Rain thought, always wanting to save everyone he met, and promised to support him no matter what. Rain felt grateful to have such loyal comrades and declared they would save the city from its oppressive rulers. That night, the Horizon Lord planned to leave town on vacation. As soon as he was gone, Edgar paid hundreds of gold coins to his strongest knight, ordering him to bring back Rain's head. After Edgar left, he called forth a small beast girl with a bell and began beating her. All she could do was silently wish for someone to save her. The next morning, Rain went to the Order of the Knights to report Edgar's assault. But before he could finish, Gillett appeared and said there was no need for an investigation. Accusing the Lord again would land Rain straight in the execution chamber. Later, while walking with Kanade, a beautiful night girl appeared from an alley and said she wanted to thank him for what he'd done. She said she'd heard how Rain had defeated the most dangerous bandit group in the entire land, but needed his help to bring order to her town. Apparently, the knights had all been corrupted by money from the Lord, especially Gillett, the commander, who covered up all the Lord's crimes. Stella believed that with Rain's help, they might have a chance to save the country. When Rain wondered if they could really trust her, Kanade said she seemed honest enough, so Rain decided to believe her. But they needed a plan to gather evidence of the Knights' corruption. Over the next few days, Rain teamed up with Stella and the Knights to carry out their plan, and he finally got the new weapons Donovan had made for him. Eventually, they lured the Knights to a mysterious warehouse, and Stella thought it was amazing how easily the Knights fell for their trap. The corrupted leader of the Knights heard there was proof of their crimes hidden inside, so he ordered his men to destroy any evidence as soon as they found it. When the Knights entered the building, one was quickly neutralized and the gates locked from the outside. With the twins freezing the place down, the Knights began to fall one by one. Rain's special gauntlets made by Donovan were key to taking them down. But Gillette managed to slash off the weapons just before Rain fired, and he spotted Stella fighting alongside Rain. Stella told Gillette it was already too late because Tanya and Kanad had destroyed the entire order of knights. She jumped down to face Gillette alone, calling him a traitor who was destroying the city. Gillette rushed to attack, but Rain distracted her by throwing his sword, then punched her down, claiming he was the world's justice. Despite that, Stella couldn't forget the man she cared for and charged again, slashing Gillette and saying no knight would abandon his duty for money. A few hours later, Edgar was beating a girl after hearing his corrupt knights had been arrested. He was confident he could still destroy Rain with his personal guards, but suddenly the hero appeared at the window, telling Edgar that Rain was far more powerful than he imagined and could steal his lifestyle right from under him. Edgar threw him a ring, saying it could kill Rain and keep him ruling the land however he wanted. Meanwhile, inside the girl's memories, she recalled the happy orphanage where everyone cared for her, but now she just wished someone would save her. Shortly after, Stella arrived at the Lord's mansion and told the guards Edgar was under investigation for corruption. The guards called for backup, and soon an entire army surrounded the girls to stop their escape. Edgar, knowing no one could break through his army, prepared to torture even more ultimate species, but the girls blew up his gate and stormed inside. While the chaos raged, Rain snuck into the dungeon with the fairies. Sora used her searching magic to trace mana flows in the building. She found many trapped girls, but also detected one source equal to an ultimate species, which puzzled Rain. He wondered what an ultimate species was doing here. To check if this source was an enemy, he told the girls to save the humans while he searched for the ultimate species himself. As guards continued being defeated, Rain found the room where the mana source came from. When he opened the door, he found a poor girl locked behind prison bars. She was even stronger than an ultimate species. She was a demigod. After healing her wounds, Rain told her he was there to help and tried comforting her, asking for her name. The girl cried and said her name was Nina, then hugged him tightly. She remembered being kidnapped and how her shield had protected her from Edgar's harm. But he brought out all her orphan friends and threatened to kill them if she didn't comply. She begged him not to hurt them, but he forced a slave collar onto her and beat her in front of her comrades, saying she would one day allow him to gain the power of the gods. That miserable life was all she'd ever known. Rain promised he would save her, but she told him the slave collar was impossible to remove. Rain told Nina to believe in him, realizing he could use his beast-taming power once more to break the collar's seal. The backlash from undoing the magic electrocuted him painfully, and Nina begged him to stop, saying no one would care if she disappeared. But Rain insisted he would be sad even if they just met, because he believed together they could overcome the pain. After all, it wasn't just his strength now, it was the strength of all the girls supporting him. Using that power, he shattered the slave collar's magic and freed Nina for the first time in 3 years. Meanwhile, the knights were busy wrecking Edgar's guards, while Kanad and Tanya toyed with them like they were mere playthings. One desperate guard ordered his men to use hostages as human shields, but from above, hundreds of fireballs rained down, burning them all. Sora and Runa proudly announced they had rescued every hostage. With the hostages safe, the girls unleashed their full power, and Edgar realized his army was being wiped out. The curse on his ring grew darker and stronger. Inside the mansion's grand hall, the girls found Rain carrying yet another rescued girl, prompting a joke about how many more BAs he was planning to pick up. Kennedy admired the new girl's fluffy tail and promised to cuddle her every day. They were busy having fun when the mansion's lord suddenly appeared, surprised they'd gotten so far. Before he could react, Rain restrained the ugly fat lord, but the lord's son appeared and summoned a terrifying Grim Reaper from his ring. The Reaper instantly killed Rain. It turned out this was all part of the hero's plan, who gloated over Rain's pathetic death before flying away. But inside the mansion, Rain was still alive. All the girls hugged him tightly, amazed he survived an instant death attack. As they puzzled over this miracle, Sora cast a poison status effect on him, thinking she'd finish the job. The girls stared at her like she had lost her mind, and Sora explained that Rain hadn't just gained one power from taming the fairies. He had gained two. One was the ability to cast multiple spells at once, and the other was a power that nullified any special status effects, saving him from the demon's instant death attack. Jealous Edgar glared at Rain's growing harem, secretly wishing they'd all perish. But then the ring's dark powers activated and began swallowing Edgar's soul. As the ring fed on him, Rain recognized the evil power. It was the same demon who killed his parents and burned his homeland to ashes, leaving him a broken orphan. The demon emerged from the smoke, asking if they were the ones who awakened him. He vowed to kill them in the most brutal ways possible. Realizing thousands of humans were nearby, the demon flew away, preparing to hunt them all. When the demon reached the city, he started blowing up houses and setting streets on fire. Kanade kicked him out of the sky, and the demon saw that Rain's group had caught up. Swearing to destroy the demon, Rain charged in. Kanade launched herself from a building, punching the demon towards Tanya, who knocked him down. Rain used his gauntlet to restrain the demon's movements, though it didn't affect the beast. It was all part of their plan to distract the demon while the fairies unleashed a massive explosion to burn him. But when the dust settled, the demon walked out completely unharmed. He realized he'd need reinforcements to win this fight. From the ground, hundreds of demonic servants charged at Rain's party. The girls quickly wiped them out with their magic, but the demon warned that he could summon an endless horde. He also reminded them he could attack them all at once. As the others rushed to Kanade's side, Tanya took to the sky, blasting away countless useless monsters with her fiery breath. While the group tried to heal Kanade, Tanya kept holding off the demon's attacks. But her efforts weren't enough. After a powerful blast knocked her away, Rain ran to check if she was okay. Tanya stood up, pretending she was fine despite the obvious pain. Realizing his regular attacks were useless, the demon unleashed a massive magical storm, raining explosions down to burn the entire city. This horrific scene was hauntingly familiar to Rain, a nightmare from his past. He launched all his fireballs at the demon, while the fairies summoned a holy light sphere from above to pierce the demon's heart. At that moment, Rain poured his warm, magical energy deep into the girls, empowering them beyond limits. Fueled by this, the girls charged forward, beating the demon fiercely. The fairies then activated their judgment ability, and Kanade soared from the sky to crush the demon beneath her. But when the dust settled, the demon remained unharmed. With a single snap of his fingers, the demon summoned hundreds of dragons and ground beasts, but his real target was the innocent villagers of Horizon City. As he tried to flee, Tanya unleashed her fiery breath again, only to have some of his dragons sacrificed to block it. The demon declared the battle over. Rain was desperate, wondering how he could save all the villagers and defeat such a powerful foe. Then Runa and Sora stepped up, saying they could finally be useful. They promised to teleport all the villagers to safety while the others kept fighting. Meanwhile, Mina questioned if they should even be fighting this demon, but the hero coldly reminded them that their only mission was the Demon King. He refused to help anyone else, convinced Rain had no chance against this monster, the same demon who killed his family. Elsewhere, Sora and Runa found Stella and the Knights, urging them to gather all citizens for teleportation. Once the villagers were safe, the girls assured Nina that Rain would protect them. Back in battle, Kanade continued smashing demons while Tanya incinerated them, telling everyone else to escape safely. On the city's other side, guards gathered the remaining citizens but refused to trust the fairies, believing their hatred for humans. Then the man whose sausage the girls had devoured appeared, asking how his meat tasted. When the girls praised it as juicy and delicious, he was relieved, telling the others the fairies were just like them. One girl and her grandmother remembered being saved by the fairies before, and slowly the others began to trust them. Together, they teleported most of the citizens away. But just as they finished, the monsters discovered their hideout. Runa and Sora split their powers to teleport the remaining people to safety. Meanwhile, Kanade and Tanya kept fighting the beasts, and more adventurers arrived. The Knights revealed this was an order from the Adventurers Guild. Ruby begged everyone to help Rain and his ragtag crew. Then Donovan showed up with a crate full of weapons, announcing that his finest creations would be free. He owed Rain a debt. The adventurers quickly formed a battle line for Rain to face the demon. Grateful, Rain promised to save the city once and for all. As Sora finished teleporting the last villagers and Runa burned the last of the demons, Nina wondered how she could contribute. She'd spent her life being protected and wondered if it was okay to be the one who needed saving. But just as Sora completed the last teleport, she realized Nina had disappeared. At the same time, Rain noticed the demon was still far away, but Tanya warned that shifting into her dragon form would only make her a juicy target for an instant kill. Meanwhile, the fairy's teleportation magic took too long to activate for Rain to rely on it. Suddenly, Nina ran up and hugged Rain, insisting she couldn't just run while others protected her. She wanted to to fight alongside them. Both Tanya and Kanade realized she was the demigod they desperately needed, since only demigods could teleport instantly. Rain asked if she could help, and Nina promised she would. Just then, a horde of beasts charged at him, so Kanade and Tanya vowed to handle the monsters while Rain faced the demon. The demon sneered, thinking Rain was nothing but a foolish insect, and tried blasting him. But Rain Spider-Man'd away, skillfully dodging every attack using his gauntlet. As he got closer to the demon's level, the demon prepared his ultimate attack, but Nina teleported them away at the last second. Together, they flew closer to the demon again. The demon realized they were using teleportation to fly, but Rain boosted his power anyway. The demon taunted him, saying it was already over for Rain. Then, Rain unleashed all his dragons and revealed that his boost did more than enhance physical strength. He teleported straight to the demon and sealed him with taming bands. However, the demon's dark aura started engulfing Rain, trying to consume him. But Rain remembered the people who cared about him and who counted on him, and with that, he awakened his hidden taming god powers, overriding the dragon's control. Even in millions of years of demon existence, this was the first time anyone had pulled off such a feat. Rain raised his hand and said he couldn't have done it without his comrades. The demon broke free and Rain unleashed all the dragons at him. As the demon began to vanish, he wondered aloud what his name was, but Rain cheekily said he wasn't about to snitch. Then, the demon disappeared. Nina's mana was completely drained, and they began to fall toward the ground, but Tanya caught them just in time. Meanwhile, Kanade and the rest of the girls waited anxiously as the sun rose, signaling the evil was finally defeated. 3 days later, the girls were busy helping rebuild the city, while the store manager kept feeding the fairies his massive sausage. After a while, Nina told Rain she wanted to keep joining his adventures, but Rain wasn't sure if he could tame a demigod. The girls, however, reminded him he'd already done crazier things. So Rain took off his gloves, bit his finger, and began the summoning ritual. Magical taming seals appeared around Nina, and after she repeated her name, the sigil bands flowed into her hand, sealing their contract as Rain's new pet. Kanade was thrilled to have a new little sister. Tanya was eager to cuddle her, and Runa was just glad this new sister wasn't a grumpy pain like the one she already had. Everyone was happy to welcome their new sister, and Rain smiled, glad to see them all so joyful. Later that day at the Adventurers Guild, Rain was surprised to hear he was promoted all the way from E rank straight to C rank. Everyone agreed he was a top-tier adventurer now. Feeling proud, Rain joked that their inn was getting too cramped and asked if there was a bigger room for their broke but awesome crew. Ruby quickly said it would be better to buy a house instead, then she could trap them all in the city. The girls thought it sounded amazing to have a place they could all live together, so Rain agreed. After checking out a bunch of ridiculous-looking homes, they feared there might not be anything suitable. But just then, Ruby showed them the final option. A beautiful mansion with a massive bathtub perfect for all the plot development they could want, and best of all, it was the cheapest house in the entire nation. Tanya immediately sensed something was off about the deal. Not because of Ruby's weird smell, but because it seemed way too good to be true. So Ruby finally spilled the beans. The house was actually haunted. While most of them didn't care, Kanade completely freaked out. She hated ghosts. Runa asked what the ghosts even did, and Ruby said they were pure mischief. They flipped pillows, chilled bathwater, and even slipped curry under seats so it looked like someone had an accident. Everyone thought it wasn't a big deal, but Kanade offered to just sleep outside if it got too creepy. Rain, ever the cautious one, suggested they at least check the inside before deciding. So they all stepped inside. As they moved deeper, Nina sneezed and gave Kanade a mini heart attack. Tanya noticed the house was surprisingly clean for an abandoned place. Suddenly, the furniture started shifting on its own, and a woman's voice yelled at them to leave. Then, a hot maid appeared. The fairies tried to zap her away with magic, but she kept popping back, growing angrier with every attempt. Tanya figured the maid probably had no attack magic, and when the maid spotted Kanade's vulnerable backside, she went straight for some bullying to scare her off. But Kanade, cornered, refused to back down. Fueled by fear, she broke through her limits and unleashed astral attacks, even trying to bite the ghost. Meanwhile, the twins formed an astral barrier to trap the maid, and Tanya kept Kanade from going too wild before she finally devoured the ghost. Once things calmed down, Rain asked if the maid wanted to talk. The maid said she'd rather possess Rain instead, but he simply commanded her to stop, freezing her in place. When she asked how, he casually said some old guy taught him phantom taming, though that was his whole story. Even the ghost was baffled, but the girls were used to Rain's weird powers. With his strength, Rain pushed the maid to the floor and she gave up, telling them to just burn her. But Rain wanted to talk first, and his words made her interested. She introduced herself as Tina Holy, a maid who had died serving in the house. Tanya asked how she became a ghost, and Tina revealed her old boss was a sadistic womanizer who killed her. She'd been haunting the place ever since, not even realizing she was dead. Tina admitted it was time to move on and stop scaring them. Rain asked Kanade if she was still scared, and Kanade said she'd be fine as long as they were all together. Rain patted her head, and everyone smiled. Then he asked Tina if she wanted to live with them. Since her haunting made the house cheaper, he figured she might as well stay. Tanya told Tina to accept his kindness. Tina agreed to join the party and live with them. Back at the guild, Rain signed the contract for the house, and Ruby was amazed he had added a ghost to his team. Ruby welcomed him warmly, saying Horizon was now his true home. Rain was shocked but happy to finally have a place to call his own. Meanwhile, in the city, the hero showed up at a shop demanding a week's worth of free rations. The shopkeeper insulted him and his party, calling them worthless and saying they didn't care about the city under attack. The hero considered getting supplies elsewhere, but no one wanted to help him. The villagers told him to get his cowardly party out. Cornered and angry, the hero destroyed the shopkeeper's stand and left. As he walked away, a villager said the beast Tamer was a real hero compared to him, and Ariel swore to kill Rain one day. Later, Canada was glad Rain would finally sleep in a bed instead of the floor. That night, Tina prepared a feast with Runa, and everyone was excited to eat Rain's meat. Nina thanked Rain for not letting her be alone anymore. Hearing this, Rain remembered losing everything and the hole in his heart since then. Though Tina thought they were lucky to be a family, the girls assured her she wasn't alone either, since she was now part of theirs. As Rain looked at them, he realized joining the hero's party had been an escape from his loneliness. But now, with people who cared, he finally remembered what having a family felt like. The girls noticed his tears, but he laughed it off as just being eager to eat. Deep down, though, he knew he was crying because of the new bonds he'd formed, the home he'd gained, and the family he could always come back to. And that's where this recap ends. But before ending this, shout out to you guys for always showing up first like a true MVP. And if you're hyped as I am, hit that subscribe and ring the bell. Let me know your wildest theories down below and brace yourself. Next time's gonna be absolute chaos. Imagine being called the weakest loser in the hero's party, only to reveal you've been hiding a cheat skill that lets you tame the ultimate species, command the gods, and maybe even wipe out the whole world. The story began with our boy Rain, stuck in the hero's party, treated more like a servant than a teammate. Every day was miserable, and after years of putting up with it, the arrogant hero Arios Orlando finally kicked him out. Arios told him straight to his face that he was useless, and only slowed everyone down because they always had to save him from monsters. Rain didn't argue, and he just took off his hero's cloak, left it behind, and walked away. Later, he sat alone on a bench in the town square, thinking about every hurtful thing they'd said. Things he had once ignored now cut deep. He had no idea how he was going to make a living. Then some kids ran up to him, asking to see his trick again. Rain stood, cast a spell on a bird, and formed a temporary contract. The bird landed in front of them and gave a little bow, making the kids cheer. When he released it, they started saying they wanted to be beast tamers like him. Rain asked why they didn't want to be heroes. They said heroes were just snobs who looked down on people. Adventurers, on the other hand, could make money, travel, and have fun. That gave Rain an idea. Later that day, he went to the Adventurers Guild. The receptionist told him he had to pass a trial first, kill 10 goblins and collect 20 medicinal herbs. With help from his squirrel partner, Rain easily found a group of goblins and took them down. They were only F rank, so they weren't much trouble. While counting the runestones they dropped, he heard a scream in the forest. He ran toward it and saw a beautiful cat girl about to be killed by a D-rank tiger. Rain tried to stab the tiger in the neck, but his sword snapped in half. The beast knocked him into a tree, leaving him in pain and barely able to move. He shouted for the girl to run and braced himself to die. But she didn't run. She jumped high into the air and kicked the tiger so hard it went down in one hit. Her strength reminded Rain of a legend about the 4 ultimate species, and one of them, the cat spirit, was said to be so rare that people thought it was just a myth. She told him she was a cat spirit, then collapsed. Rain caught her in his arms, and her first words were that she wanted to eat his meat. A moment later, she proved she meant his rations, devouring them and saying she hadn't eaten in days. She introduced herself as Kanade, one of the last cat spirits alive. After Rain told her his name, she teased him by saying she was glad an ugly guy like him had saved her. She asked about his life, so he told her his whole story as they walked back to the guild. She was the first person who had ever really listened to him. When he finished, she felt bad for how he'd been treated, but Rain patted her head and said he was fine. She told him he wasn't weak at all. Even if he thought he was just a useless beast tamer, she believed he was strong enough to tame her. She explained that when he saved her, she realized he might be the only human who could tame a cat spirit. She offered herself to be his partner, and Rain thought that with an ultimate species by his side, maybe he could finally save people from suffering the way he had. Rain realized that it didn't matter whether Kanade was an ultimate species or not. What mattered was that he wanted to know her better. So, he removed his glove, bit his finger, and let a drop of blood fall into his palm. Holding it out, he began chanting the taming spell. Magical seals appeared, circling Tamed until a glowing sigil formed on her arm, marking their contract. When the ritual ended, Tamed saw the symbol and smiled, while Rain still couldn't believe this wasn't a dream. She reached out, took his hand, and they both ran off together. At the Adventurers Guild, Ruby congratulated Rain on completing his first quest and becoming an official F-rank adventurer. She also questioned how a scruffy loser like him had managed to get a girl to even talk to him. Rain received his payment, 50 copper coins, but quickly realized it wasn't enough to rent a room. Ruby reminded him that no girl would want to share a room with someone smelling like an anime convention anyway. That's when trouble walked up. A sleazy adventurer approached, saying he'd never seen a real cat spirit before and telling Tamed to ditch the ugly human she was with. Taned's ears twitched in anger. She yelled that Rain was her hot master, but the man just laughed, doubting that someone so weak could tame the rarest ultimate species. Tamed shot back that Rain was far stronger than him, which made the man challenge Rain to an arm wrestling match with Tamed as the prize. Rain knew that refusing might let this creep harass Tamed again, so he accepted. They clasped hands and the match began. A moment later, Rain slammed the man's hand into the table so hard it was over instantly. Tamed declared Rain the winner, while the man whimpered on the ground, realizing his days of sleazy games were over. After dragging the loser away, Rain wondered when he'd become this strong. Tamed explained it was a side effect of taming an ultimate species. Part of her power had transferred to him, giving him the physical strength of a cat spirit.